My name is Blake, and at 29, I stood in my father's office watching my parents sign the papers that would make my younger sister Meredith CEO of our family's multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical company. They had just fired me after one day back from Harvard Business School. I shocked everyone when I started laughing. Did you forget, Dad? The patent that made this company worth anything? It's in my name, not the company's. You taught me well to always protect your assets. My parents' faces drained of color as I turned to leave, my laughter echoing through the boardroom. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate triumph, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy stories about overcoming family manipulation and finding your own path to success. Trust me, what happens next will show you that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting everything. Let's continue with how my perfect sister's throne was built on quicksand she never saw coming. Growing up in the Harrison household meant watching my younger sister Meredith receive every privilege while I worked for every scrap of recognition. At 16, I spent my summers in our company's research lab learning formulas and studying compounds, while Meredith enjoyed shopping trips to Paris with our mother. Our father would pat her head and call her his little princess, while barely acknowledging my existence unless I'd achieved something noteworthy. That dynamic shaped everything that would come later, though I didn't realize it at the time. During my sophomore year at MIT, I made a discovery that would change everything. Working late in the university lab on a project about pain management alternatives, I stumbled upon a revolutionary drug formula that could provide relief without the addictive properties of opioids. My professor called it brilliant, groundbreaking even. When I shared the news with my parents during winter break, my father's eyes lit up for the first time I could remember. He suggested I patent it immediately. For safety. He said, advising me to put it in my personal name rather than risk university claims. I was so naive then, so desperate for his approval, that I followed his advice without question. The promises started flowing after that. My father began including me in company meetings, introducing me as his brilliant daughter who would lead the company into the future. He promised that after I completed my Harvard MBA, the CEO position would be mine. My mother suddenly showed interest in my life, asking about my studies and my plans. For 3 beautiful years, I believed I had finally earned my place in the family. I worked harder than ever, graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, and returned home ready to take my rightful position. The morning I arrived at the office, briefcase in hand, and hope in my heart, I found Meredith already seated in the CEO's office. Her nameplate gleamed on the desk, and she wore a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. My parents were there too, avoiding my eyes as they shuffled papers. When I asked what was happening, my mother cleared her throat and delivered the news with clinical detachment. They had decided I was too aggressive for leadership, too abrasive for the delicate work of managing relationships with investors and partners. Meredith, with her charm and social graces, was better suited for the role. The betrayal cut deeper when Meredith's mask slipped. As our parents left the room, she leaned back in what should have been my chair and smiled. "I've been planning this for years, Blake. Every dinner party where you were in the lab, every investor meeting where you were at school, I was here building relationships and proving I was the better choice. You may have the brains, but I have what really matters in business, the ability to make people like me." Her smugness made my stomach turn, but something else was bothering me. The timing of everything felt too convenient. That evening, I discovered the full extent of their deception. Using my laptop to access my old company email, I found threads dating back 2 years between Meredith and our parents. They had orchestrated everything, including encouraging me to apply to Harvard just to get me out of the way, while they positioned Meredith as the natural successor. One email from my mother particularly stung. "Blake's too independent. She'll never be the team player we need. At least at Harvard, she'll make connections we can use later." My calm exterior throughout that first day fooled them all. They expected tears, anger, maybe even begging. Instead, I maintained perfect composure as I cleared out the office I'd never actually occupied. I made small talk with employees who looked at me with pity, thinking I was handling rejection with grace. Inside, my mind was racing, calculating, planning. You see, they had made one critical error in their perfect scheme. They had forgotten about the patent, the one my father had so wisely advised me to keep in my name. As I walked out of the building that day, I wasn't defeated. I was preparing for war, and they had no idea the weapon I held. The next morning, I sat across from Catherine Chen, one of the city's most respected patent attorneys. She reviewed my documents with growing interest, occasionally glancing up at me over her reading glasses. "Miss Harrison, you do understand what you have here. This patent is ironclad, registered solely in your name. Your father was quite thorough in ensuring it was protected." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My father's paranoid insistence on perfect legal protection had given me the very tool I needed to fight back. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I'd left the office. 47 missed calls from my parents, dozens of text messages ranging from concern to barely veiled threats. My mother's voicemails evolved throughout the day, from sweet manipulation to harsh demands. "Blake, sweetheart, we need to discuss this as a family," became, "You're being selfish and childish," which finally transformed into, "How dare you threaten your own family after everything we've done for you?" I let them all go unanswered, focusing instead on my next moves. The real shock came when I visited the bank to check my financial situation. The personal accounts were fine, but the trust fund my grandmother had set up for me, meant to be accessible, when I turned 25, showed a zero balance. The bank manager looked uncomfortable as she pulled up the records. It seems there were withdrawals made over the past 3 years, all authorized by the trustees. My parents were the trustees, and the withdrawal dates corresponded perfectly with Meredith's lavish lifestyle upgrades, including her new condo and her Mercedes. That evening, Janet Miller, my closest friend and the lead researcher at the company, called me in tears. "They fired me, Blake. HR called me in this afternoon and said I was being terminated for performance issues. I've had perfect reviews for 7 years." She had made the mistake of vocally supporting me during a staff meeting, questioning why the announced succession plan had suddenly changed. Her termination was a message both to me and to anyone else who might consider taking my side. My apartment building's doorman looked apologetic when he handed me the official notice 2 days later. "I'm sorry, Miss Harrison. We've been instructed that your lease is being terminated. You have 30 days to vacate." I didn't need to ask who owned the building. My parents had purchased it years ago as an investment, generously allowing me to live there at below-market rent. Now that generosity had become another weapon against me, the family dinner ambush came next. My aunt called, insisting I come to her house for Sunday dinner, claiming she wanted to help mediate. I should have known better. When I arrived, I found the entire extended family gathered, all armed with versions of events that painted me as an ungrateful daughter, trying to destroy the family business out of jealousy. Meredith sat at the center like a queen holding court, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Even my grandmother, who had always been my champion, shook her head in disappointment. "Your sister has worked so hard for this opportunity, Blake. Why can't you be happy for her?" The coup de grace came when Meredith cornered me in the kitchen. "You know, Blake, this could all go away. Sign over the patent rights to the company where they belong, and I'll make sure you have a nice position. Maybe head of research. You always did prefer the lab to the boardroom anyway." Her condescension dripped like honey laced with poison. That's when I knew I'd been right to keep my plans close to my chest. That night around 2 a.m, my apartment building's security system alerted me to movement outside my door. Through the peephole, I watched 2 men attempting to pick my lock. I smiled, grimly grateful for the additional security measures I'd installed just days before. The cameras I'd hidden captured everything, including their faces and the license plate of the van they escaped in. The attempted break-in was sloppy, desperate. They were after the physical patent documents, not realizing that in the digital age, those papers were backed up in multiple secure locations. The cease and desist letter I sent to the company the following Monday hit like a bomb. I formally notified them that any attempt to develop, manufacture, or profit from my patented formula without my express permission would result in immediate legal action. The letter was copied to their major investors, the board of directors, and strategically leaked to a few key industry publications. Within hours, the company's stock price began to wobble as investors questioned the stability of their most promising product. Catherine called me that afternoon with an update. "They're panicking. I've already received 3 different offers from their legal team, each more desperate than the last. They're offering you money, positions, anything to make this go away quietly." I instructed her to decline everything. This wasn't about money or position anymore. This was about showing my family that I was not someone to be discarded. The retaliation was swift and vicious. My professional reputation became their primary target. Meredith leveraged her new position to spread rumors throughout the industry. I was unstable, she whispered to anyone who would listen. Brilliant, but impossible to work with. Maybe even dealing with substance abuse issues. Former colleagues who had once respected me began avoiding my calls. Speaking engagements I had scheduled were mysteriously canceled. My carefully built professional network crumbled as the Harrison family's influence spread like poison through every connection. But I had anticipated this. While they focused on destroying who I had been, I was already becoming someone new. Every attack they made only strengthened my resolve and confirmed that I had made the right choice. They thought they were backing me into a corner, not realizing that cornered animals are the most dangerous. As I packed up my apartment preparing for whatever came next, I felt a strange sense of liberation. They had taken everything they could from me, which meant I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The private investigators started following me during my second week of independence. They weren't particularly subtle about it, probably by design. A dark sedan would trail me to coffee shops, to meetings with my lawyer, even to the grocery store. Meredith wanted me to know I was being watched, wanted me to feel the pressure. What she didn't realize was that I was documenting every instance, building my own case for harassment and stalking. The fabricated scandal broke on a Tuesday morning. A gossip blog popular in pharmaceutical circles published photos that appeared to show me entering a rehabilitation facility. The images were grainy, but convincing enough to those who wanted to believe. The accompanying article, citing anonymous sources close to the family, painted a picture of a brilliant mind destroyed by pressure and addiction. My phone exploded with concerned messages from the few contacts who still spoke to me, while others simply severed ties without asking for my side of the story. Catherine helped me trace the photos to their source. They were masterfully doctored, combining real images of me with footage from a rehab center in California. The metadata revealed they'd been created just days before publication. We had evidence of deliberate defamation, but pursuing it would take time and money I was rapidly running out of. Meredith had calculated correctly that fighting every fire would exhaust my resources. The financial warfare intensified when my credit cards started declining. Not from lack of funds, but from suspicious activity that maxed out every limit. Someone had used my information to make massive purchases, all of which required hours on the phone to dispute. My credit score plummeted overnight. When I tried to apply for a business loan to fund my legal battles, every bank turned me down. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. The eviction from my apartment came with just 10 days' notice instead of the promised 30. New ownership has different priorities. The building manager explained, not meeting my eyes. He'd always been kind to me, and I could see the shame in his posture. I didn't blame him. He was just another casualty in my family's war against me. As I packed my belongings into a storage unit, I wondered if they expected me to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness and a warm bed. Professor Chen, my mentor from MIT, called with a warning that chilled me to the bone. "Blake, I've been contacted by several colleagues. There's pressure to retroactively fail your thesis to claim academic misconduct. I won't do it, but others might not be so principled. Your father has many friends on the board of trustees." The idea that they would try to erase my academic achievements, the one thing I had earned entirely on my own, revealed the true depths of their vindictiveness. Meredith's boyfriend, Thomas, entered the picture like a shark smelling blood. A corporate lawyer with a reputation for burying opponents in paperwork, he filed a series of lawsuits challenging my patent on increasingly absurd grounds. Each required a response, each cost thousands in legal fees. He knew most would be dismissed, but that wasn't the point. The point was to drain my resources and will to fight. I was living in my car when they escalated to physical threats. The first note appeared under my windshield wiper after a meeting with a potential investor. Stop now or face the consequences. The second came with a photo of Janet leaving physical therapy, her arm still in a cast from when she'd been attacked in a parking garage. The message was clear: they could hurt the people I cared about. The hackers they hired were more sophisticated than the thugs who'd tried to break into my apartment. They breached my cloud storage, searching for the patent documentation. What they found instead were the decoys I'd planted: false documents with subtle errors that would invalidate any claims based on them. The real documents were safely encrypted and stored with multiple law firms. Still, the violation of my digital privacy felt almost worse than the physical stalking. When the company tried to file competing patents based on independent research, I was ready. The emergency injunction Catherine filed included evidence that their supposed new formulas were simply variations of my original work. The judge granted it immediately, freezing all their development efforts. The victory was satisfying but temporary. I knew they would find other ways to attack. The betrayal by my ex-boyfriend David cut deeper than I expected. We'd dated through law school, parted amicably when our careers took different directions. When he showed up offering support and legal advice, I was grateful for a friendly face. Within a week, he was photographed having dinner with Meredith, and suddenly all the strategic information I'd shared with him was being used against me. Trust, I learned, was a luxury I could no longer afford. The health scare shouldn't have surprised me. Weeks of sleeping in my car, living on gas station food, and constant stress finally caught up. I collapsed in a courthouse bathroom, waking up in a hospital room with no one beside my bed. The doctor's concerns about my blood pressure and stress levels felt almost comical. How could I explain that rest wasn't an option when my family was trying to destroy me? Meredith's hospital visit was perfectly timed for maximum cruelty. She arrived with flowers and a concerned expression, waiting until the nurse left to drop her mask. "This is what happens when you fight battles you can't win, Blake. Look at yourself. Alone, sick, homeless. And for what pride sign over the patent, and I'll make sure you get the help you clearly need." She patted my hand with mock sympathy. "I'll even pay for a nice facility somewhere quiet where you can rest." The implication was clear. Give up my patent or be institutionalized. As she left, making sure the nurses saw her wiping away tears of concern for her troubled sister, I realized we had moved beyond business warfare. This was about complete annihilation, and they wouldn't stop until I was broken or dead. The question was whether I had enough strength left to survive until I could turn the tables. The judge's ruling felt like a physical blow, even though I'd seen it coming. He dismissed my claims of patent interference with prejudice, citing lack of substantial evidence, despite the mountain of documentation Catherine had submitted. It wasn't until later that we discovered his son worked for Thomas's law firm, a conflict of interest that should have required recusal. But by then, the damage was done. The legal system I'd counted on for protection had been compromised by my family's influence. Living in my car had become an art form by then. I'd learned which parking lots had security that looked the other way, which 24-hour gyms would let me use their showers for a small fee, and how to make a single cup of coffee last 4 hours in a diner while I used their Wi-Fi to job hunt. Every rejection email felt personal now. Word had spread through the industry like wildfire that Blake Harrison was unstable, unreliable, and possibly criminal. The industry conference in Chicago was supposed to be neutral ground. I'd scraped together enough money for a day pass, hoping to network and find someone willing to look past the rumors. Instead, I found myself invisible. Former colleagues walked past without acknowledgement. When I approached a group discussing pain management innovations, they closed ranks and changed the subject. During lunch, I overheard two executives laughing about the Harrison girl who thought she could take on her own family. Delusional. Meredith's engagement announcement was strategically released during the conference. The pharmaceutical industry's power couple, the press release, gushed. Photos of her massive diamond ring and their plans for a spring wedding dominated the trade publications. Thomas was quoted saying he'd never been happier that Meredith had shown him what true partnership meant. The subtext was clear: they were stable, successful, united. Everything I wasn't. My parents' public statement appeared in the Wall Street Journal the next week. They expressed their deep sadness over their eldest daughter's struggles with mental health and substance abuse. They claimed to have tried every intervention, but sometimes love meant letting go. They hoped I would get the help I needed and knew the door was always open when I was ready to rejoin the family in a healthy way. The lies were so smoothly delivered that even I almost believed them. The theft of my remaining funds happened quietly. One morning I tried to buy breakfast and found all my accounts emptied. Not just overdrawn, but closed. The bank claimed I had authorized the closures myself, providing forged signatures as proof. My emergency cash hidden in my car disappeared the same night. I watched the security footage from the parking lot camera, recognizing one of the thieves from the earlier break-in attempt. They were getting bolder. Death threats escalated from notes to actions. My car's brake lines were cut while I slept in a shelter discovered only because I'd learned to check every morning. A bullet hole appeared in my windshield after a meeting with Catherine. When I went to the police, they took my report with barely concealed skepticism. A homeless woman claiming her wealthy family was trying to kill her. They'd heard crazier stories, their expressions said. Janet called me crying one night from her hospital bed. They'd broken her arm this time, made it look like a mugging. They told me next time it would be worse. Blake, I have a daughter. I'm so sorry. I couldn't blame her for backing away. She'd already sacrificed more than anyone should have to for friendship. Her withdrawal left me truly alone. The Harvard situation felt like losing my identity. The dean of the business school sent a formal letter stating they were reviewing my degree in light of new information about potential academic irregularities. My professors were being pressured to sign statements about my erratic behavior during school. Professor Williams, who'd written my recommendation letters, called to warn me that refusing had cost him his consulting contract with a major pharmaceutical company. My family was erasing every achievement I'd earned. The competitors who approached me weren't interested in justice. They smelled weakness and wanted to exploit it. One offered to buy my patent for 1/10 of its value. Another suggested a partnership where I'd do all the work while they took all the credit and profit. The vultures were circling, waiting for me to become desperate enough to accept their scraps. Each meeting ended the same way, my refusal followed by threats about how much worse things would get. My mother's interview on a popular podcast devoted to troubled children was masterfully performed. She wept delicately as she described finding drug paraphernalia in my teenage room a complete lie. My violent outbursts never happened, and how adoption trauma had manifested in my inability to bond with family I wasn't adopted despite her claims. She painted herself as a martyred mother who'd done everything possible for a damaged child. The host's sympathy was palpable, as my mother suggested other parents in similar situations consider tough love. The revelation about my father's affair came from an unexpected source. A private investigator I couldn't afford anymore slipped me a file out of pity. Photos showed my father with his secretary in compromising positions. Financial records revealed years of expensive gifts and a secret apartment. The final piece, emails showing Meredith had discovered the affair months ago and was using it to control our father. Do what I want, or Mom learns everything. My golden sister was a blackmailer on top of everything else. The orchestrated car accident happened on a rainy Tuesday. I'd been driving carefully, paranoid about vehicle tampering, when a truck ran a red light and slammed into my driver's side. The impact crushed the door, leaving me trapped as smoke began filling the cabin. If a passing nurse hadn't stopped and pulled me out, I would have died there. The truck driver disappeared before police arrived, and the vehicle was reported stolen. The message was clear: they were done with threats. Rock bottom felt like drowning in slow motion. Lying in another hospital bed, this time with real injuries, I stared at the water-stained ceiling and considered surrender. My body was broken, my reputation destroyed, my resources gone. Maybe Meredith was right. Maybe I should just sign the papers and accept whatever crumbs they offered. At least then the pain would stop. I reached for my phone to call Catherine to tell her I was done fighting, but my hand stopped when I saw the old photo saved in my phone. It was from the day I'd made my discovery, standing in the MIT lab holding up the successful test results. My face glowed with pure joy and accomplishment. That young woman had created something that could help millions of people manage chronic pain without addiction. She'd done it through intelligence, dedication, and ingenuity. No one could take that away, no matter how hard they tried. I put the phone down and rang for the nurse instead. If they wanted to kill me, they'd have to do better than this. I wasn't done fighting. I was just getting started. Diane Mitchell walked into my hospital room like an avenging angel dressed in Armani. Thomas's ex-girlfriend was everything I wasn't at that moment: polished, confident, and absolutely furious. "I've been watching your family destroy you," she said without preamble, setting a thick folder on my bedside table. "Thomas used to practice his arguments on me, bragging about how he was going to bury you in legal fees. I thought it was just typical lawyer bravado until I started digging." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Turns out your sister and my ex have been very sloppy with their financial crimes." The evidence Diane had compiled was staggering. As a forensic accountant, she'd used her skills to trace money trails that Thomas and Meredith thought were hidden. Offshore accounts, fraudulent invoices, embezzled funds from the company disguised as consulting fees. They'd been stealing for years, long before I returned from Harvard. The patent fight had made them reckless, accelerating their theft to fund their legal assault against me. Every transaction was meticulously documented in the folder she'd brought. My salvation came from an unexpected source inside the company. The email arrived through an encrypted server signed only, "A friend who remembers your kindness." Attached were internal documents showing how my parents had falsified board minutes, forged signatures, and manipulated shareholder votes to install Meredith as CEO. The whistleblower also included recordings from board meetings where my family discussed their plan to force me out and steal my patent. Their own words captured in digital clarity would be their downfall. Finding a rival pharmaceutical company willing to protect me took careful negotiation. Nexus Pharmaceuticals had been watching our family drama with interest, seeing an opportunity. Their CEO, Margaret Quinn, was a self-made woman who'd built her company from nothing. "I despise bullies," she told me during our clandestine meeting in a hospital cafeteria. "And I especially despise people who steal innovation. We'll provide you with security, legal resources, and a platform to develop your drug. In exchange, we want exclusive licensing rights." It was a lifeline disguised as a business deal. The counter lawsuit we filed was a work of art. Catherine had partnered with Nexus's legal team to create a devastating document that laid out every crime, every lie, every act of harassment. We sued for patent theft, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy fraud, and attempted murder. The evidence package was so comprehensive that the judge had no choice but to fast-track the case. More importantly, we copied the FBI's financial crimes unit on everything. The media storm began with a single investigative journalist who'd been skeptical of my family's public statements. Sandra Liu had noticed inconsistencies in their timeline and started digging. When I provided her with documentation of their crimes, she ran with it. Her first article, "The Harrison Pharmaceutical Empire Built on Lies and Theft," went viral within hours. Suddenly, reporters who'd ignored my calls were desperately seeking interviews. Former employees emerged from the shadows like survivors of a shipwreck. They'd been silent out of fear, but the shifting tide gave them courage. One by one, they came forward with stories of Meredith's workplace abuse. She'd fired single mothers for taking sick days, blacklisted researchers who questioned her methods, and created a toxic environment of fear and favoritism. The golden child's image tarnished with each revelation. The security footage from my apartment break-ins became critical evidence when one of the thieves was arrested for an unrelated crime. Facing serious jail time, he flipped immediately, admitting that Thomas had hired him to steal my patent documents. He provided text messages, payment records, and even recorded conversations. Thomas, the brilliant lawyer, had been stupid enough to use his personal phone for criminal conspiracy. The FBI raid on his office was captured by news cameras, his face a mask of shock as they led him away in handcuffs. My mother's desperate attempt at damage control backfired spectacularly. She called a press conference to refute the allegations, claiming our family was being victimized by my mental illness. But reporters had done their homework. They asked about the trust fund theft, the forged signatures, the adoption lie. She crumbled on live television, alternating between tears and rage. When asked directly if she'd tried to have me killed, her stuttering non-denial spoke volumes. The conference ended with her fleeing the podium as reporters shouted questions. Meredith's final desperate move was attempted murder, though she tried to make it look like an accident. At a pharmaceutical conference where I was finally welcomed back, she approached me at the cocktail hour with a peace offering, a glass of champagne to toast new beginnings. Something in her eyes warned me. Instead of drinking, I accidentally spilled it on a potted plant. Within minutes, the plant's leaves were wilting. Security detained her as she tried to leave, finding a vial of concentrated digitalis in her purse enough to cause cardiac arrest. The rival company's backing gave me resources to fight properly. Nexus's security team was military-grade professional, ending the harassment campaign overnight. Their lawyers filed motion after motion, burying Thomas's firm in their own tactics. Most importantly, they gave me a lab to continue developing my drug, improving the formula, while my family's company remained frozen by legal injunctions. The FBI raids happened simultaneously across multiple locations. Our parents' home, the company headquarters, Meredith's condo, and Thomas's office were all hit at dawn. The evidence they seized included documents showing decades of financial crimes not just against me, but against shareholders, employees, and the government. Tax evasion alone would be enough for serious prison time. The empire my parents had built on corruption came crashing down in a single morning. Board members who'd rubber-stamped Meredith's appointment scrambled to distance themselves. An emergency meeting was called where they voted no confidence in the entire Harrison leadership team. Several board members publicly apologized for not investigating my claims sooner. They'd been blinded by my family's reputation and their own financial interests. Now facing personal liability, they were eager to cooperate with authorities. Stock prices for Harrison Pharmaceuticals plummeted as investors fled. The company that had been worth hundreds of millions was suddenly toxic. Major partners canceled contracts. Researchers jumped ship to competitors. The building my father had been so proud of became a ghost town of empty offices and darkened labs. Everything they'd built through decades of scheming crumbled in weeks. Thomas abandoned Meredith the moment the FBI presented their evidence against him. His lawyer negotiated a deal where he'd testify against her in exchange for reduced charges. Love apparently was less important than avoiding decades in federal prison. Meredith's rage when she learned of his betrayal was volcanic. She'd trusted him completely, never imagining he'd flip as easily as their hired thugs. The golden child was learning what I'd always known in our family: loyalty was a luxury no one could afford. The courtroom victory felt surreal after months of fighting for survival. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and damning. My patent rights were confirmed absolutely, with triple damages awarded for the attempts to steal them. The years of harassment, defamation, and attempted murder resulted in additional millions in compensation. But more satisfying than the money was watching my family's faces as their crimes were read into the official record. My mother wept, my father stared at his hands, and Meredith glared at me with undisguised hatred. They'd lost everything. Harrison Pharmaceuticals filed for bankruptcy within a week of the ruling. Between the investor lawsuits, employee class actions, and federal penalties, the company couldn't survive. The building was sold to pay creditors. The research labs where I'd spent my teenage years were stripped and abandoned. Employees who dedicated their careers to the company found themselves unemployed because of my family's greed. I felt sorry for them, but not guilty. The Harrisons had destroyed their own legacy. The federal investigation revealed the scope of my parents' crimes. Asset forfeiture took their homes, cars, art collection, and bank accounts. The government seized everything purchased with illegally obtained funds, which was essentially everything they owned. Watching them escorted from their mansion with nothing but the clothes on their backs was a reversal of fortune they'd never imagined possible. The Golden family of pharmaceutical society became cautionary tale outcasts overnight. Meredith's arrest made national news. The footage of her in handcuffs, designer suit wrinkled and makeup smeared became the defining image of her fall. She was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and a dozen other crimes. Her bail was set at $5 million with no one willing to pay it. The princess who'd never spent a night without silk sheets found herself in a federal holding cell waiting for a trial that would certainly end with decades in prison. Nexus Pharmaceuticals made me an offer I couldn't refuse: run their new pain management division with my patent as the cornerstone product. Margaret Quinn personally mentored me through the transition from survivor to executive. The salary was generous, but more importantly, I had resources to finally bring my discovery to market. The drug that my family had tried to steal would now help millions while making me wealthy beyond my parents' wildest dreams. My first act as division head was hiring Janet and the other employees who'd supported me. They'd risked everything for loyalty and deserved rewards for their courage. Janet became my chief operating officer, her broken arm healed, but her fighting spirit stronger than ever. Together we built a team based on merit and innovation rather than family connections and fear. Our division became the most profitable in Nexus within 6 months. My parents' begging letter arrived through Catherine's office, written in my father's shaky hand. They were living in a tiny apartment, working minimum wage jobs, humiliated and broken. They begged for forgiveness, for financial help, for anything to ease their suffering. My mother had added a postscript about how adoption comments were just stress-induced mistakes. I read it twice, feeling nothing but mild disgust. I had Catherine send a single response: they would receive no help from me, but I would sign whatever documents they needed to confirm the truth about the affair and blackmail. Their confessions helped ensure Meredith's conviction. My grandmother reached out through her lawyer with genuine remorse. Age and clarity had helped her see how she'd been manipulated. She'd rewritten her will, leaving everything to me with apologies for believing their lies. I visited her once, finding a frail woman haunted by guilt. "I should have known," she whispered, holding my hand with paper-thin fingers. "You were always the truthful one." I forgave her because holding on to anger at a dying woman served no purpose. She passed peacefully 2 weeks later, finally free from my family's poison. Prison didn't humble Meredith. Her letters arrived sporadically, filled with blame and rage. According to her, everything was my fault. If I'd just accepted my place, none of this would have happened. She couldn't understand that her own greed and cruelty had created this outcome. I read each letter once before filing them with my lawyer, evidence of her continued inability to accept responsibility. Her 25-year sentence meant she'd be old before she could hurt anyone again. The drug launch exceeded every projection. Named Liberation in honor of my journey, it provided chronic pain relief without addiction risks. Patients called it life-changing. Medical professionals praised its innovation. The Nobel Committee shortlisted it for consideration. Every success felt like vindication for the years of struggle. My discovery was helping people while my family name became synonymous with corporate corruption. Industry recognition followed quickly. The same conferences that had shunned me now begged for keynote speeches. Publications that had printed lies about my mental health ran feature stories about my resilience and innovation. The Pharmaceutical Innovation Award I received was presented by the same executive who'd laughed about my delusions in Chicago. His discomfort as he handed me the trophy was delicious. Success, I learned, had a way of rewriting history. The final humiliation for my parents came when they were caught stealing from their minimum wage employer. Even broken and poor, they couldn't resist their criminal instincts. The judge, aware of their history, showed no mercy. They joined Meredith in federal prison, though in different facilities. The Harrison family's pharmaceutical dynasty ended with all three principals behind bars, their legacy nothing but cautionary tales in business schools. Thomas tried to flee the country but was arrested at the airport. His legal career was over, disbarred and disgraced. His attempt to throw Meredith under the bus hadn't saved him from prosecution. 5 years in minimum security was lenient, but he'd never practice law again. The brilliant attorney who'd tried to bury me in paperwork was now buried in consequences of his own making. The Forbes cover story featuring me as the pharmaceutical revolutionary who refused to break was professionally satisfying, but the photo meant more. Instead of a stiff corporate headshot, I'd insisted on being photographed in my lab surrounded by my team. Janet stood at my right side, other loyal employees around us. We looked like what we were, a family of choice built on respect and shared purpose rather than blood and manipulation. My new company's valuation hit $10 billion within 2 years. Investors who'd fled Harrison Pharmaceuticals begged for meetings. I took particular pleasure in declining investment from firms that had backed my family's crimes. Success gave me the luxury of choosing partners who shared my values. The girl they'd tried to destroy was now worth more than their entire empire had ever been. The sweet vindication came in small moments. Former employees who'd shunned me asked for jobs. Industry leaders who'd believed the rumors apologized publicly. Universities that had considered revoking my degrees instead offered honorary ones. But the best moment was standing in my corner office looking out at the city skyline and realizing I'd built something my family never could, an empire based on innovation, integrity, and genuine relationships. They'd tried to break me, but I'd emerged unbreakable. The therapist's office became my sanctuary every Thursday afternoon. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves specialized in family trauma and betrayal, helping me process the hurricane of emotions I'd suppressed during survival mode. "You protected yourself by shutting down emotionally," she explained during one session. "Now we need to help you feel again safely." The work was hard, bringing up childhood memories of being overlooked and unloved, but necessary. Each session peeled back layers of pain, revealing the strength underneath that had always been there. Creating the Phoenix Foundation felt like completing a circle. Named for rising from ashes, it provided scholarships and support for students from toxic families. The first recipient was a brilliant young woman whose parents had sabotaged her college applications out of jealousy. Watching her graduate with honors, knowing I'd helped make it possible, healed something inside me. The foundation grew quickly, funded by my success and supported by others who understood the unique pain of family betrayal. My cousin Lucas reached out after years of silence. He'd been at that awful family dinner, one of many relatives who'd believed the lies. His apology came with tears and genuine remorse. "I should have known better. You were always the honest one, even as kids." I forgave him because holding grudges against everyone would poison me the way bitterness had poisoned my parents. He became one of the few blood relatives I maintained contact with, proof that DNA didn't determine destiny. Dating again felt like learning a foreign language. Trust came hard after David's betrayal. But Michael Chen, a biotech entrepreneur I met at a conference, was patient and understanding. He'd built his own company after his family disowned him for choosing science over the family restaurant business. Our first dates were tentative, both of us waiting for betrayal that never came. Slowly, carefully, we built something real. He never pushed for more than I could give, understanding that some wounds needed time. Janet's promotion to CEO of our division was both strategic and personal. She'd proven herself brilliant at operations while I preferred research and development. More importantly, she'd stood by me when it cost her everything. "Partners," she said, shaking my hand after the board approval. "Real partners." Our success was shared, built on mutual respect rather than manipulation. The company culture we created emphasized collaboration over competition, innovation over intimidation. The prison visit to Meredith happened 2 years into her sentence. I went alone, needing to see if any humanity remained in my sister. She sat across the reinforced glass orange jumpsuit hanging on her thin frame, but her eyes still held that familiar contempt. "Come to gloat," she asked, picking up the phone. I told her about my success, the foundation, the lives our drug was saving. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Regret. But it passed quickly, replaced by the sneer I remembered. "You got lucky," she said. I left knowing she'd never change, but I'd needed to see it for closure. My Harvard speech was titled, "Success is the best revenge, but purpose is better." The auditorium was packed with students eager to hear about resilience and recovery. I talked about the dark times sleeping in my car while my family tried to destroy me. But I focused more on what came after building something meaningful, helping others, choosing integrity over easy revenge. They wanted to break me, I concluded. Instead, they freed me to become who I was meant to be. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. The penthouse office was everything teenage Blake had dreamed of and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city where I'd once been homeless. The walls displayed patents, awards, and photos of our team celebrations. My desk, made from reclaimed wood from the old Harrison Pharmaceuticals building, served as a daily reminder of transformation. But the most meaningful decoration was simple, a small framed photo of the MIT lab, where everything began. Throwing away the family photo felt like shedding old skin. It was the last one I'd kept from before everything went wrong. My mother's smile looked genuine, my father's hand rested on my shoulder, and Meredith stood beside me like a real sister. But photos lied as easily as the people in them. I dropped it in the trash without ceremony, replacing it with a picture from our last company retreat. 40 faces smiled back, my chosen family who'd helped build something extraordinary. Michael proposed during a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant. No grand gestures or public spectacles, just honest words about building a future together. "I can't promise perfect," he said, "but I can promise real." The ring was modest by billionaire standards, but perfect in its simplicity. I said yes because I'd learned to recognize genuine love. Our wedding was small, attended only by those who'd proven their loyalty. Janet was my maid of honor, and no one from the Harrison family received invitations. The foundation's 5th anniversary gala raised $10 million for students escaping toxic families. Success stories filled the evening: a doctor who'd overcome parental sabotage, an artist whose family had tried to crush her dreams, a scientist whose parents had stolen his scholarship money. Each represented triumph over betrayal. In my keynote, I shared the lesson that had taken years to learn. Family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you in the storm and celebrates with you in the sunshine. Sometimes I still dream about that day in my father's office, watching them sign papers to give Meredith everything. But now I wake up grateful. Their betrayal had been a gift disguised as cruelty. Without it, I might have spent my life seeking approval from people incapable of giving it, pouring energy into a toxic well that would never nourish me. Their rejection forced me to find my own worth, build my own empire, and create my own definition of success. The letter from my mother arrived on a random Tuesday. She was dying, she wrote, and wanted to make peace. I read it twice, feeling nothing. The woman who'd publicly called me adopted and disturbed now wanted absolution for her conscience. I didn't visit or respond. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt. Forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. I'd forgiven them for my own peace, but that didn't mean they deserved a place in my life. Looking back, the journey from that boardroom betrayal to my current life seemed impossible. The frightened girl who'd laughed to hide her pain had transformed into a woman who built empires and lifted others. The patent they'd tried to steal had made me wealthy, but the lessons learned made me wise. Trust carefully, but love deeply. Success means nothing without integrity. And sometimes the family that rejects you is doing you the favor of forcing you to find the family you deserve. My story resonates because it's universal in its pain and specific in its triumph. Everyone knows betrayal, but not everyone finds the strength to transform it into purpose. When young entrepreneurs ask for advice, I tell them this: your worst day might be your best gift. The people who try to break you might accidentally be showing you how strong you really are. Don't seek revenge. Seek excellence. Build something so magnificent that their betrayal becomes just a footnote in your success story. Because in the end, living well isn't just the best revenge. It's the only revenge worth having. Before we conclude this incredible journey together, I want to ask you, have you ever faced betrayal from those who should have protected you? How did you find the strength to rise above it? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of triumph over adversity. Share this video with anyone who needs reminding that their current struggle might be preparing them for their greatest success. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to billions. And remember, sometimes the family that breaks you apart is just clearing the path for the family you build yourself. Until next time, keep rising, keep building, and never let anyone dim your light.